be great. I've got to learn some steps here to get everything down.
Yeah.
Let's see, my channel. We'll go this one. Turn the audio off. All right. I'm gonna text Gary and see if he'll um if he can jump in real quick.
Oh, it's working for me on the video. I can hear both of us.
Oh, okay. Well, so I figured out the problem on my side as far as a certain setting, but apparently it's like every time that I do this, I have to. I don't know. I have to like set because when I start it up, for some reason my audio stops working, and I have to set up a new audio input capture every time, which I shouldn't have to, but I seem to have to do that every time. So I guess I'm gonna have to do
Okay.
that and then invite the person. This is more headache than this is supposed to be. So streamlined and blah 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 and really easy. Yeah, right. It's a complete mess. I'm just glad that it's working, and I appreciate the time that you took to
Do you?
do this.
Yeah. Do you know how new this software is? I haven't heard of Streamlabs before, so.
So Streamlabs actually makes OBS, which I used to use all the time.
Okay.
But they have
Yeah.
a complete new. So if you get the Streamlab, well, it used to be Prime, now it's Ultra. So if I want to, like I'm using the free version, which you can collab cam with one person, but if you get the paid version, then you can have 3 other people on at a time. So you have 4 people on in one whack, and you just send them all a link.
Yeah.
They all join. Except I have to do 10 extra steps in order to get it to work right, and I don't understand why. So at some point, I'm going to have to really dig in and find out why I have to set up or figure out what steps I need to take when I'm going to do this to get it down so we don't have to do what we just did, where we have to call each other on the phone to hear each other. That's completely, which I could hear you, but you couldn't hear me, and that's
Yeah. I couldn't hear you. No. But now I
okay.
can. So.
So, do you have a few minutes, Grant?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because here's what I want to do. This subject has come up. I want to play a little bit of um, a little bit of a clip from the Tom Woods show when he had Jeff Deist on, because this subject after Marjorie
Okay.
Taylor Greene made her comment about national divorce. They did a
Yes. Okay.
kind of hybrid show the other day, and I want to play a little bit of the audio from that because everybody's throwing it out the window, and I understand, but I think we shouldn't be throwing it out the window. So let me – oh, quit it. Let me pull it up, and I'll play like the first let's see here. I'm going to turn this down for a minute so it's not.
Yeah. Hold on a sec.
Sure.
Money and monetary policy, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I don't know the details of what happened, but I do know that our friend Gene Epstein at his Soho forum had a debate there, and people are talking about it. And it's funny the way
Okay, that can't be the right one. Yeah, it is. I don't remember this part in.
they talk about it. Like, it's so funny what you're allowed to talk about or conceive of in the U.S. and what is inconceivable, inevitable. The question is whether we're
Okay. Let me get to the.
Okay.
It's no problem for Norway and talking about it. And it's funny the way they talk. I think in part because Marjorie Taylor Greene keeps mentioning national divorce, and that's making everybody angry because it's treason to mention national divorce, and how dare she, and she should be impeached. But it's got the term out there, and people are talking about it. And it's funny the way they talk about it. Like, it's so funny what you're allowed to talk about or conceive of in the U.S. and what is inconceivable. Now, it's okay for Soviet republics to break off. No problemo. It's no problem for Norway and Sweden to split apart. No problemo. But there's some kind of divinely given shape and size of the United States that makes it not subject to these rules of more mundane countries. We are one indivisible. It's idolatry, and there's no utilitarian analysis here of, is the union doing us any good in the first place? It's all this mysticism.
Well, it is distressing to see the extent to which even raising the question is pounced upon. And I think you said that political arrangements exist to serve us, not the other way around. So that's for
Okay, just stop it right there. So I want your input on this before we get any farther into the audio.
Yeah.
What are when somebody says to you something about secession or what they're calling it now a national divorce, what are your thoughts on this, Grant?
Man, I have many. I think from a very objective point of view, though, I took political geography in college, and one of the very key aspects of that class was the fact that like no state is permanent. And you look at maps throughout decades and centuries, like they're always different. You go back to World War One, and Europe is very different from what it is today. So I think we have to like escape this view that something is permanent. I mean, you go before 1959, Alaska and Hawaii weren't states, and then it just upon succession, more states were added. After the original 13 states ratified the Constitution in 17 was it 89, but from my own bias perspective, like I would love an independent Missouri, just from the fact like the stuff that we do at the Capitol. It's so much easier to be held to your state representative and your state senator rather than for me, I live in District 3 for U.S. Congress, and Blaine Lukemeyer doesn't know who I am, and I don't know who Blaine Lukemeyer is. And more just from my opinion, I think he's a war hawk than anything. So it's one of those things that like there's no accountability at the federal level. I think where Marjorie Taylor Greene really kind of screws this up though is like it's not as simple as splitting red versus blue, because that's kind of going with a narrative that Republican Democrat is the only objective truth, when reality is that humans are more complicated than just the fact of fitting in two parties, even libertarian as well. So I don't know what the solution is. I mean, obviously I would say the more decentralized the better, but people get the most when I hear about national divorce or states seceding the union, where people get up in arms is really the argument with China. But like most states, I think, would advocate for something similar to what the Bill of Rights, what we have now. I'm certain states like California or the other West Coast states would probably advocate against the Second Amendment. But part of the beauty of the Second Amendment is it allows for people to own their own firearms, and with that, when you have individualized states, it creates a need for militia groups and things like that, communities coming together to protect their own. So like even if like a national army came in through each individual state, each individual state would have the ability to create their own treaty if they were apart from the federal government. But then also too is like, well, if this state gets ransacked, we're next, so there's even that. It's kind of going to that backing of the the original plan with federalism that the Constitution was implementing. It's kind of a way to purify everything. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts to add to that.
Well, when we talk about the Constitution, I mean, freedom, people who want liberty and freedom want to abide by the Constitution, and I completely understand that. Some of what the founders said when they said alter or abolish the government if you're unhappy with it. A national divorce is a way of altering it because you're pulling states away. Now, you're also pulling that funding from that state to the federal government therefore weakening it a bit because the flow of money is, cut off a little
Yep.
bit. I just think, again, people make it, when we talk about this, when anybody talks about it and they mention something about it, they just say, well, national divorce, and everybody's like, well, it's not that easy. Well, of course it's not that easy. But
Yeah.
I think people are being too naive to say we can't do it. The founders gave us this directive. They made it our responsibility to say, if you don't like what your government is doing, you have not only the right, but you have the obligation to alter or abolish it. Now, a national divorce is one of those options. Is it the best? Maybe not. I just don't like the fact that people just throw it away. The left's going to say, well, you just want slavery in your state. That's what you want to be like the South. Again, learn some history.
Yeah.
That's not why they seceded. But it's, I don't know. Every time I hear this talk, when I hear somebody talk about it, it interests me a great deal. Just to sit and think about the steps, what might occur, what you have to do in order to get something like this done and be successful, and then the ramifications of it afterwards. Because I think once one state does it, I believe that there will be blue states and red states both that follow suit. When Trump was in office, how many blue states said they wanted to secede? Now that a Democrat is in office, they're like, oh, if you want to secede now, you're a crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist. But when Trump was in office, they all wanted to bail out of the Union. They want to use it as a political tool where we might use it to make ourselves more free.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's like California is like a perfect example of that. Like there's been the talks of the state of Jefferson up in the northern part where they just want to get away from San Francisco and Los Angeles and those huge metropolitan areas. But there's also I think it was 2018, it's the 2018 midterm elections. The state of California collected enough signatures to split California evenly into 3 different states. But it made the signature threshold, but then the Secretary of State of California withheld it from the ballot. So it was not voted on. Probably because it would have passed. But like that's kind of one of those crummy things that, people that are in centralization of power do to maintain the power that they already have. And also money flows along with that too.
Yeah, and then you had Illinois. There was legislation proposed to make Cook County its own state because the rest of Illinois, or the majority of Illinois, is fed up with Cook County. So they're like, fine, you can be your own state and ruin it all and leave us out of it. Because all that money and influence and power pretty much flows from Chicago and Cook County, and they just degrade the rest of the state with their mafia. I don't even think mafia type behavior is a good way of explaining it, because the mafia had more honor than the government does. Even they had a line they wouldn't cross. The government doesn't seem to have a line. Yeah. So, but even in Illinois, they looked at it, and it's like, okay, if those people are sick, I mean, can you imagine the ramifications? Can you imagine the the outcry if they would have succeeded and said, all right, Cook County's their own state. Now we have 51 states. And I just wonder how many people that live in Chicago now, had that gone through, how many of those people would have filtered out into other parts of the states when they're like, we don't have to do all of this. We can move to another part of the state and actually be a lot more free. It could, I feel bad for people who are. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I knew plenty of people just through Twitter and other social medias that they lived in California when COVID lockdown started, and immediately, because of their lockdown procedures, people just automatically lost their jobs. It was just the companies they were working for they couldn't keep up with the there wasn't demand for the things that they were offering or the services they were providing, and automatically lost their jobs. So there was a threshold of, yeah, there were people that left California because they wanted to, but there were people that left California because they had to. There was no jobs for them there, and they had to move to other states. So stuff like Chicago, where the taxes are just ridiculously high, it it would have been immediately become a despotic state, probably within the first decade of existence. But like there's people that, I mean, just like an example, like, people that live along the Mississippi River in Illinois, like there's no way they're being represented the way that they want to be represented. Like the fact that, like, I get gas in Missouri at, well, right now, like, I think here in Columbia it's like 2.92 a gallon, but whatever it is on the Mississippi, and you cross the river, and it's like 350, 360 a gallon. People come into Missouri to get gas. They pay Missouri taxes. They're not paying Illinois taxes unless they have to. So it's just one of those things, and that's one thing too about secession as well, is it's going to make people really think about, like, where do I really want to live, as well. And it's like it's a free market principle, because it's like, oh well, regulation, more economic prosperity.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was a guy that drove a truck when I worked at a local tobacco store here years ago, and he drove a truck mainly around Missouri. He would stop in Missouri to get his cigarettes because they were way cheaper than they were in Illinois. And
Yeah.
we would always joke around, and it was right after Thanksgiving because he hated Illinois. The only reason he was there is his parents still lived there, and he said once my parents are gone, he's like, I'm coming across the river. But we would joke, and right after Thanksgiving, I said, well, did Stalinist Illinois let you have turkey soup for Thanksgiving? He said, well, kind of. They hung up a cooked turkey, they poured water through it, and then when it hit the bowl, that was our turkey soup. He said it didn't literally have turkey in it. It just had the turkey flavoring in it. I was like, oh. So we would
Oh,
always make
no.
Stalin jokes. Because he's like, dude, my taxes, the cost of living. But, over there,
Yeah.
a carton of cigarettes at the time was 80, 90 bucks. He'd come over here and get him for like 40, literally half the price. And then I was talking to other people,
Yeah.
like one guy, he would come in and buy his chewing tobacco from us. And he said one time, I went to Minnesota one time and forgot to buy some.
Yeah.
And got up there, and it was almost $9 a can. And I almost passed out because I was used to paying $3.40 here in Missouri. Got up there, it was almost $9 a can. And I just
Yeah.
looked at my friend, one of our friends that lives up there, and I was like, "Why do you live in this state? Why are you living in this god awful state?" Now, Minnesota is not anything compared to Illinois and New York and California, but the thing I don't like about Minnesota is if you want to buy a handgun, then you have to buy a handgun permit. And then if you want to get
Yeah.
concealed carry, then you also have to apply for concealed carry. Their gun laws
Yeah.
are absolutely abhorrent up there. And then I think they're looking at, or they were, I think they were looking at, you were going to pay, so however many miles you drove on your car a year, they were going to tax you on the amount of miles that you drove your car each year. Now, people,
Yeah.
again, love to complain about the roads. I think you and I have talked about this before. But I've been up into Iowa, and I got up into Minnesota, and their roads in Minnesota are no better than here in Missouri. And actually, a lot of places, they were actually worse than our roads. And
Yeah.
everybody complains about Missouri roads. Like, take a trip out of state. Go to Minnesota.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I probably should have had the rover from Mars to traverse the pothole-filled interstates I was driving on. But, whatever.
Well, and I'd even make the case too that the places that I've been in Missouri where the roads are the worst are actually the places that are more blue than red. And I mean, here's the thing: like, you go to Gasconade County or Cooper County or Callaway County, like, they're supremely rural. 70% of their budget is roads. Like, that's where majority of the taxes go. So they have to keep their roads good, because if you can't keep your roads good, then why are you justifying that in your budget?
Right. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It's
and then the state of Missouri is going to audit you and be like, what the crap are you guys doing? Like so yeah, like there is definitely justification for why why if you're fiscally conservative, you're going to be better off. But like, I can't imagine how many times I've gone down side streets in Kansas City. And this is just coming from a person who does not live in Kansas City. And there's potholes the size of crater bombs, like in the middle of the road. And I'm like, if I hit this, my car will stall. Like,
or disappear.
yeah, or disappear. Yeah.
Yeah, and and that's another thing on this, on the national divorce topic too, is they mentioned in the podcast here that, you might have a red state, so like Missouri is a red state, but you'll have like
Yeah.
Kansas City, Columbia, St. Louis, Springfield, that are blue areas, and they said, you know what'll end up happening is even more decentralization. That those
Yeah.
places will want to kind of divorce themselves from the state. And it's like, okay, that's just more decentralization. Now, yeah, you're going to have a lot of people moving, because instead of having to move to another state, they're just going to be like, I could literally drive, I don't know, 100 miles west or east and be out of this godforsaken crap that I'm in now. It ends up breaking down more and more. And what John Doe said earlier about balkanization, there's a lot of people now, before MTG said her thing, that there's been a lot of talk about national divorce. I mean, it's becoming more and more of I wouldn't say a popular subject, but it's becoming more of a hot issue. And I for one, think that's a good thing, because I think it makes people in government take notice that people are getting, like Texas, they have their Texit thing. Every year, more and more legislators and people sign on and go, yeah, let's do it. Let's break away from the union. Now, if Texas would do that, I have seen scenarios where they said where basically about 9 states, Missouri included, would end up, the theory is they would jump on board. So, like, let's see, was it Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, I think Tennessee and Kentucky, they would all just, so we would literally almost cut the nation in half.
It would be viable because you have that. It would be viable because you have a port and all that too. So,
and all that oil in Texas. I mean, we'd have our refineries. We'd have plenty of natural resources. It could be outstanding. I know. Will it be easy? No. Again, I just think it's silly to throw the idea out and say, well, that'll never happen, because let's face it, there's a lot. Okay, I bet you people said, 4 years ago, SEPA would never happen in Missouri. I bet a lot of people think a gold and silver bill wouldn't make it anywhere in the state of Missouri. Now, those are way different than a national divorce. But as we keep moving this line of freedom forward and we jump forward on the Freedom Index, we could get to a point, we could be like Texas that says, we don't need the feds. We can be viable. Let's exit.
I mean, I think also, though, too, is like when we do things like SEPA or gold and silver, like the beauty of that is it's trying to correct the problem that was created in the first place by the federal government. It's basically attacking the supremacy clause head on, and stating, no, like we work in tandem together, and that when we choose us, the states, not to work with the feds are powerless. Like the ATF, for example, has only 10,000 staff, like 10,000 agents. Now, when you have how many Missourians are there? There's like, there's like a few million Missourians. 10,000 ATF agents aren't going to be able to confiscate millions of Missourians' guns rights. It's logically impossible. So, so when we do things like SEPA or gold and silver, or any deregulation that the federal government has usurped power in from the Constitution, it's a course correction back to the way that things were actually supposed to be. But then, like, going back to Tom Woods, not everyone studies the Constitution like Tom Woods does, and not everyone is an originist like Woods is, and so there's a definition problem with how people view the Constitution. It's not a living, breathing document. You have to read it the way that the founders intended it to be read. And I would argue that they had way more foresight than people give them credit for.
Well, yeah, and with again the way Tom Woods and some of the others look at this as far as a nation, they use the words compact. What do they call it? A compact. Now I completely lost the other word. But it's like the compact theory or something to that effect. The state signed a compact, but it's not binding. There was nothing in there that said you can't ever leave. The founders, even Madison said, yeah, people want to leave, they can. That's their right. That's their right. Even Madison, who's a big government guy, said, yeah, states can leave. Jefferson was huge on this. I think he said more Deuteronomy, so he would have been, I think as time went on, he was thinking even more and more subdivisions. States within states would have been even better because you would have had more decentralization. So, again, this is something. Again, this I don't know why it fascinates me so much, Grant. The thought. When I read books like the Politically Incorrect Guide to American History, and you hear these things, you're just like, huh? And then I don't know if you heard or not, Grant, but apparently Michael Malice has a new book called White Pill: Good versus Evil.
Yep.
And I heard Tom Woods talk. Well, that was the episode today that I listened to. I can't wait.
That's apparently the premise of the book is how when things like the Soviet, when the USSR became implemented, and Leninism and Stalinism became full brunt force of Russia, that even though there was decades of darkness and no communication with the outside world, that the people of the Soviet Republic worked in tandem with the people of the outside world as best as they possibly could, and got their freedom back, or freedoms. But regardless of that, because the Federation of Russia is still communist. But I think even in that is that when there's darkness in a political structure, is that there's still a greater light that can come out in the end of any situation. It's just people having to work together. I think right now we're at in America is we're so disunified, and there's so many aspects to that, social media and just things like that people don't understand how to work together. But I mean, like, if I was out on the street and I, wanted to strike a random conversation with a random person, and let's just say they happen to be like a super far progressive person, majority of the time, I'm probably going to get along with them. Majority of the time, like when I talk to people that are Democrats or on the left, I usually have a pretty good conversation with them because they actually do recognize like a lot of the problems. The difference is like the solutions. And I think with topics like national divorce, why I find it fascinating is that it gets people kind of to think about, like we could do this, but is there also a different way? It gets people to kind of think about solutionary measures rather than actually just focusing on the dread and darkness that we have these people in DC trying to enact on us on the daily.
Yeah, I know at one point in their conversation today, Tom Woods brought up when Pope John Paul II went to Poland, and I guess the officials said, "Hey, why don't you just act like you're sick and not show up?" And he's like, "Screw that, I'm showing up anyway." And the masses that were held were huge, and the people were looking around and saying, "Oh my God." Like, look, we're all here together. And at that moment, it kind of stuck that we can work together,
Yeah.
we can be together and do something. And I think that's a lesson for us here. A lot of people have just thrown in a towel and said, there's no fixing this. But as that one, drawing that's been going around here a long time where you got the big players playing on a board and the people are bent over and the game board is on their back, and it's like all you have to do is literally stand up. I think
Yep.
people, places like Poland, the USSR, they figured that out. They just had to stand up, and
Yeah.
I think that's what people here are going to have to come to grips with. That at some point you have to get involved. You have to do something. You don't have to pour all your blood, sweat, and tears in it, but you have to.
No.
You have to. You have to speak up. You have to stand up. And yet you have to put forth a little effort. We don't expect everybody to just spend every waking hour when they're not working or whatever to spend all their time doing this. But you do have to pay attention and you have to do something.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will be shocked at the results they get when enough of them. I mean, look, the first time I went to the Capitol, I think there were 8 of us. Then the next time there were 12.
Mhm.
The last time I went was 22. Now, that
Yeah.
seems insignificant to a lot of people. But when you go to the Capitol with 22 people, the legislators recognize it. They understand that there are people, the citizens of Missouri are coming
They
together
were
in an
surprised.
effort.
They were surprised when 8 of us just showed up all
Yeah.
together.
Now
And we
you
were
talk.
from all different parts. We were all different parts of Missouri. And that was just 8. But the fact that 22 people from all over the state of Missouri advocating for very specific legislation showing up, yeah, and it's probably going to get bigger. I do hope that, and I'm pretty certain. But it's one of those things is that you have to educate people. I how many people I interact with on the daily that they can quote to me what they heard on Fox News or CNN or ABC, NBC, CBS, the mainstream news, but they can't tell me what's going on in Jeff City. They can't tell me what happened at the Columbia City Council or the Columbia School Board on a Monday night, things like that. And granted, I probably should pay attention to my city and school board more closely as well. But I do pay attention to what goes on in Jeff City. That's something I do, a lot of time for. Um, and we have to get out of this mindset that, whatever the top 5 news stations are trying to communicate us is gospel truth, because it's not. And do they tell some of the truth? Sure, but they fabricate it to no end.
Well, yeah, they pull out the juiciest parts they know will get people angry on either side of the aisle, and it gets them. It's almost like a drug for some of these people. They keep tuning in and hear
Yeah.
Democrats bad, Republicans good, or Republicans bad, Democrats good.
Bad.
All the normal
Yeah.
talking points without the thinking. It's just
Yep.
spewing in an echo chamber, and the addicts are there to soak it up. And then when you have a conversation with those people, they literally don't understand anything but what's been handed to them on a plate,
Yeah.
and they have no idea how much BS is riddled throughout the argument. And
Yeah.
but it's sure you can make the effort to try to educate them, but honestly, 90% of the time plus, it goes in one ear and out the other, because it's too uncomfortable for those folks to admit
Yeah.
how much they've been lied to.
Yeah. Well, also too, like there is an aspect of laziness as well, and yeah, having worked in a social work field too, like um, trying to communicate to people that they're better off not being on Social Security, disability, and Medicaid is a lot of them. Like a lot of the people I've worked with them, like they get in such like spells of anxiety just thinking about that. But like that's what government enslavement does. But then like a lot of my work was actually trying to help them find employment, and then having to go through with them like you have to report your hours twice a month to social security so they know what to take off. Like it's this whole, and then like reporting to Medicaid that you started working and that affects your benefits too, and all that stuff. It's just it's it's such a time waster. And um it's all just to take something when you would be better off providing for your own self, having your own freedom. And like it made me it just made me sad, having to see that over and over and over again. When like you know me and the people that I were working with, um wanted them to be off that, like that was the goal. But the problem is like they've been brainwashed to think that's the only way. um and like the thing is, it is very hard once you're on those benefits to get off of them, because there's no safety net to get off them. And that's also another aspect, like why government taking over social programs, it should have no basis for social programs, because it's not graceful to people when they want to get off them. It's either you're going to be homeless or you're going to be on this. That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, it most definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where this is where a lot of outlets don't do us a favor by pointing to people that get out of the system and make good on their
Yep.
own. People need to see more examples of that. Not only seeing the example, but hearing from the person on how much better they feel, how much more independent they feel, their
Yep.
well-being and everything, how much because they're actually doing some good for themselves, their family, their friends and everything else. And it's
Yeah.
not I don't know. I know what I know what you mean. I can't imagine what it's like to be drawing from that and think about, oh crap, now I got to go out and apply for a job, go through all this, and then cross my fingers and hope the place doesn't close down or I get fired or get laid off, and then where am
Yeah.
I now? I don't have anything to hold me up. But yeah, getting people to understand how much government depends on you to be dependent on them is the biggest
Yeah.
thing. Government's power lies in the fact, I mean, most of government's power lies in the fact they are dependent on you to be dependent on them. It's a double dependency. If you're
Yeah.
not dependent on them, their power's gone. They have nothing
Yep.
because they can't scare you. They can't, try to force you. Nobody's there coercing you into something that makes
Yeah.
you I don't want to say people are parasites, but they kind of turn you into a parasite. You
Yeah.
need the host.
Yeah. Yeah. There's it Yeah, I would say it's a really good example. Like I don't in some ways, like there's a point where like we're not able to take care of ourselves, but that we do have to detach. But like when you're given mechanisms that prevent you from being that independent human being that you were created to be by your creator, and someone comes away and takes that from you, like that ultimately is interfering with God's design of things. Because like we're only to be dependent on God, like that's it. And the fact that like when the government wants to step in and do that, they're stating they're God. And that they're omniscient and they know everything. to the moon and back and what's best for you, and they don't. They don't.
Yeah, they do believe themselves. I mean, well, look at them. They think
Yeah,
they have people believing that our rights are not natural. They all spring from
No.
these central planners. That
Yeah.
they don't they don't want people understanding that their rights are natural from birth. That there's no one man or group of men and women in these bureaucracies that pass these things out to you because they're so benevolent and they care about you so much. I mean, that's one of the great hurdles of what we do is getting people to understand that there's a big difference between a right that's granted to you and rights that that are actually natural, that are enumerated in the Constitution. But even
Yeah.
if that document wasn't around, those rights would still exist.
Yeah.
It's a big hurdle to jump over. But when people finally understand that, and here's the thing, Grant, this is the way I look at it. I think if people would take a look inside and see that and really dwell on it. You know, when you talk about murder or theft or whatever,
Yeah.
that's very personal. I mean, on a personal level, you feel something. And it's not because a government came around and said, murder's bad, don't kill anyone. Because government
Yeah.
kills people all the time. Doesn't seem to faze them at all. If you look at it that way, where it's on a personal level, you take government, you take documents, like the Constitution even, out of the equation, and you just dwell on it at a personal, individual level, then you begin to understand that, yeah, murder's bad no matter what the government says or what even the Constitution might say. Murder, stealing, rape, whatever, they're all bad because there is a victim, there is harm done on a personal
Yeah.
level that involves your liberty. And
Yeah.
so these things are inherent without anybody writing them down. They are still inherent.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's still in you.
it's an infringement on personal sovereignty
Yeah.
as well, because like I as an individual have my own sovereignty. I have a right to defend myself. I have a right to my own property. I have a right to speak my mind. As long as it's not to the infringement of someone else's sovereignty. So that's why like we have the debates on what's protected free speech and what's unprotected free speech and things like that too. So
Yeah. Well, folks, Grant, thanks for coming on with me for a little bit. I got to get to bed soon, but I appreciate you jumping on with me on this to do a test. And I thought, well, I was going to tell you that I wanted to bring up the subject, and I went to go get my hair cut, and that was a half hour past time before I actually
Yeah.
sat in a chair. And I went to my friend's house to help him with the website, and I can't ever go over there without having a at least
Yeah.
being there for 45 minutes to an hour to shoot the breeze. So I'm like, I got to get my butt home because I told Grant that I wanted to do this. Now, again, folks, this worked out. I think I understand how I need to do things, but we'll get it. Eventually, I'll get this figured out. So when I have more guests on, and they have a webcam and all this stuff, then they're able to do this and everything else. So, again, thanks a lot, Grant. I appreciate your time.
yeah.
And
Thanks for having me. And this was definitely entertaining for sure. I like talking about secession. So
well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to start extending this offer out to other people too. I mean, I've extended it to Catherine. There's going to be certain folks that, if you have a subject that just springs to mind, and you're like, I really want, you let me know. I don't care if it's like a Monday, Tuesday, whatever night,
yeah.
that we can get on here for half an hour or an hour, because I do want to put out more content. You let me know. You give me a couple days notice. I can jump on. We can do a live stream
Okay.
and just talk about
Yeah,
something for an
Maya-
hour. And
Maya wants to know what we think about the death penalty.
here, yeah. Well, let's delve into this for a minute, because
Okay.
here's my thing. I'm torn on this, because I think when someone does something unspeakable, especially to children to women, somebody defenseless,
Yeah.
and like I'm talking, murdering or doing something just god awful.
Yeah.
But then I think about giving the state the authority to put someone to death. That's where I'm torn because there are some people that do some
Yeah.
really evil stuff, and I'm like,
Oh,
I can't
yeah.
think of a way that you'd ever be rehabilitated and be a productive member of society. I know when you get out that eventually you're going to go right back into that habit again. But giving the state the authority to kill someone, I also have a problem with. So I'm kind of torn on this whole thing.
Yeah. I think I'd probably say I'm in the same boat because um I don't I really think that one, like if you're going to murder someone, if you're going to rape someone, like that's a life for a life sort of situation. Like there's nothing that can atone for that or make up for that. Um and so like in an earthly justice aspect of things, like I understand like why there needs to be a sort of death penalty for that, but like I have the same reservations in regards to the state enacting that. That isn't also me advocating for vigilante justice either. It's more of it's more of what's the most effective way, because even if you do the death penalty, um you then have hundreds of thousands of dollars and up to millions of dollars just going into appeals processes to appeal that death penalty decision, which is tons of taxpayer dollars um, for this convicted criminal, just so that he and it takes decades before it might even be possible for them to be executed. um, it's a waste of time. It's an infringement on the Eighth Amendment, um, for sure. And also the seventh, which is quick and speedy trial too. So there's such a mess with how things are structured right now, at least on the federal level. I mean, even the state level's bad too in regards to the courts. But I don't know if I have a perfect solution to it. I mean, personally, I think I'm not a big fan of lethal injection, personally, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's like, okay,
Yeah.
how do you, prison's supposed to be rehabilitation, right? But there's going to be people in there. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what they're going to do. They don't care about the consequences. They don't care what they do to other people. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you prove to people that you're serious, that you can't go around and committing these heinous acts against people
Yeah.
without some serious repercussions? Because throwing someone in a cage for the rest of their life, I mean, yeah, they're stuck. Those guys can get a lot of things they want inside the prison walls, and sometimes they live better than people on a fixed income. Are we
Yeah.
really
For sure.
rehabilitating them, and are they learning their lesson that you can't go and do these things to people? But I also look at it this way. I think one step to get more serious is to stop putting people in cages for victimless crimes. I think if we're going to take a step
Yeah.
in justice reform, that the first
Well,
thing, me
well,
personally,
that's an
is stop doing
yeah.
that.
Well, and it's a that in of itself, like putting people in prison for victimless crimes, like that's an infringement on the 13th Amendment, which the 13th Amendment contradicts itself, because it says it abolishes slavery, but yet the state can make you a slave if you break the law. I was like, well, yeah. So I think I think even in that regard, like there's such like the criminal justice system needs huge reforms. Um, and Regarding the death penalty, like I agree, like having people be rehabilitated for the rest of their life isn't a good solution either. But it's definitely a better one than I ultimately think in regards to the death penalty, at least from the state perspective, because you're not wasting those millions of dollars on appeals processes. I think also too, like, I like what some states are trying to implement with like changing the firing squads or things like that, because it's not it then doesn't pin it on one person. Because, like, if they do lethal injection, well, we know the doctor who administered the lethal injection. What if that person is found out to be innocent later on? Well, that doctor just murdered someone who was innocent of their job. Now that family has to live with the fact that that doctor killed their family member. And so, like, it's such a I don't know if there is a solution to it, because there's so many wheels turning with this subject. It leaves people in a spin, including myself.
Yeah, I think this is one of those parts where we're all humans, and in this subject matter, we have to do the best that we can. Now,
Yeah.
we've got some fixing to do, because I just got into a part in Judge Napolitano's book, Lies the Government Told You, and he's talking about,
Yeah.
one of the lies the government tells you is you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, apparently, there's been court cases where they basically said that when you're talking about innocent until proven guilty, that's just at your trial. That's not being in bail, being in prison beforehand. That only applies to the trial. Now, that comes
Yeah.
from Supreme Court, I know decision's not opinion. And they uphold this, that, yeah, you're only innocent until proven guilty inside the court. Other than that, it doesn't apply to
Yeah.
you. So it's like, now wait a dang minute. That's got to be remedied, okay? Amongst a myriad of other things. But yeah, in this part, we're human, and we can only do, fix what we can and try, I guess, literally the way it should be done, on a case-by-case basis. That's easier said than done because it's so screwed up. But again, I can't wait to have this gal on to talk about jury nullification, because if we're going to fix
Yeah.
the criminal justice system, there's a way. You yourself as a juror say, there's no victim. No one got hurt. I'm going to vote not guilty, and we're going to have a hung jury, and that's, I mean, the state can retry the case. But,
Yeah.
as we're talking about sovereignty, as you were talking about it, that's one of the most sovereign individual things you can do for another human being, especially in the justice system, is jury nullification.
Yeah.
So, all right, folks,
Yeah.
with that, thanks again, Grant. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that subject up, because
Yeah.
it's that's another touchy subject, and I'm going to have to find somebody who knows the ins and outs of the death penalty, the history, and the pros and cons, and try to find somebody that has expertise in that field and get them on, because that's another one of these topics that you could probably spend 8 hours talking about and never get through a quarter of the subject matter.
Yeah. I actually know of the director of chaplains for the Missouri Department of Corrections. Let me talk to him and see if maybe I can point you and get you someone in the right direction there.
Yeah, that'd be
So-
great. I'd appreciate that, because like I said, I'm
Yeah.
torn on the subject, and I want somebody that's got intimate knowledge and their thoughts on it. I mean, I don't bring them on here to judge them. I just want the facts and things to
Yep.
come out and just discuss the topic matter and be done. But that would be one heck of a interesting conversation. I know that
It would
I-
be. Yeah.
I find myself, the more I do this show, Grant, the more subjects I start. I know that it's a Missouri Liberty Report, and but I
Yeah.
find myself thinking about these topics, and I'm like, at some point, I'm going to have to do a show on it. Is it precisely about liberty? But no, I'm just about a big enough nerd that I want to hear and talk about it.
Yeah, well, and like things like the death penalty, we have the death penalty here in Missouri.
Right.
So like, what's a liberty aspect in regards to that, or the fact that Missouri could leave the union if they wanted to. I know plenty of people that would love to enact a constitution separate of the United States of America. So there's definitely things like that here, and those are very much liberty issues. In every sense of the being.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, folks, I know everybody's got different thoughts and reservations about a national divorce, but again, I think it's something that we have to keep in the back of our mind. And it's a tool that our founders gave us. They spoke,
Yep.
in depth on it, and it's something I don't think we should throw away because, the feds aren't going to let that happen. Well, again, the more states start looking at it, thinking about doing it, it's a very good chance that that could happen. So with that, folks, again, we'll be back here tomorrow night with Patrick Holland from the Missouri Freedom Initiative talking about what's going on in the legislature. I know he's going to want to talk about the knock and shock on March the 7th, and I will not be attending that one, unfortunately, but I know Patrick's going to have a lot of info, and we're going to get into that topic and probably gold and silver and sales tax on groceries and God knows what else. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go as long as I normally do with Patrick because I normally work Saturdays, but I get to pick my hours, and this week they mandatoried all of us to be there, so I don't get to pick my hours. I gotta go in for 8 tomorrow.
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, I gotta get. I have to get to bed at a decent time and get plenty of sleep because if I work 4 or 5 hours, I go in, I work, I come home, I take a nap, then I get up and I tune into the live stream on Saturday nights that Patrick does. 8 hours, I actually have to sleep. I have to get more than 4 or 5 hours of sleep and get back up. So again, with that, thank you so much, Grant. Appreciate your time, brother.
Yeah.
And anytime, again, you come up with another subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy these conversations for sure, and thank you for having me. And I'm glad I can help you with figuring out the live stream for sure. So.
Yeah, that was greatly appreciated as well because I feel, it's like what sucks is I used to be. Like technology was like a whiz for me, like no problem. I could just get down, and now old man brain is kicking in, and now I see myself when I was teaching, like I would teach my parents something about the computer, and they're like, oh, hey. And I'm just like, yeah, it's that easy. Now I feel like them, where somebody else is going to have like, hey, old guy, you didn't hit the button. Oh, I didn't hit the drop down menu. What an idiot I am. So yeah, I'm feeling age starting to creep in, and I hate it. But, that's the way it is. But anyway, folks, we'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30 with Patrick Holland from the Missouri Freedom Initiative. Good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves. We'll talk to you later.